it was a great success, essentially, and people wanted me to do it again. And I said, no, thank you.
That was Zoe Adjnonyoh, a writer, chef, and food justice activist from Southeast London. Zoe has become a leading voice in championing the last frontier in gastronomy, new African cuisine, and is the founder of the pioneering contemporary West African food business Zoe's Ghana Kitchen. She is also the founder of Black Book, a platform for promoting diversity in the global food industry and hospitality. She is a writer, she works in events, she does so many things, and she is actually currently writing her memoir. With that said, let's dive into our conversation with Zoe. Zoe, welcome to the I Like Networking podcast.
Yes, hello, babe. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here on the I Like Networking podcast because I love networking.
Well, I love eating, so I feel like I would prefer to do this like in your house, eating your food, because I was looking at your website and it made me so hungry. So, I'll leave this conversation and go straight to the kitchen to do
It's something. A happy marriage. We have made ourselves a happy marriage, food and networking together and conversation. 3 of my favourite things.
So, Zoe, you are from the UK?
Mm-hmm.
But you grew up in Southeast London, am I right?
Yeah, you said but. Southeast London is still in the UK.
Yeah, no, exactly, sorry.
But yeah.
Yeah, you grew up in Southeast London. You have a Ghanaian father and an Irish mother, and you've had quite a diverse career. I guess you still do because you're like a writer, a chef, an activist, like you do so many things. But
well, I wouldn't say activist, actually. I'm a bit... Yeah, I think it's it's a cumbersome kind of word. I don't feel like an activist, more of an advocate for activists, I would probably suggest. I should change my bio.
That's a nice word, advocate. I like that. I would still argue that you're kind of an activist, but we can talk about that later on. We can agree to disagree. So before we dive into everything that you've done, could you just tell us what has been the worst job experience you've ever had or your biggest career failure?
Oh my goodness. Woo woo. Wow, that's such a cool question. Oh, I've had so many terrible jobs. Okay, I think the first one that springs immediately to mind is I used to live in Brighton and I worked, I had a sequence of terrible part-time temping jobs when I first got to Brighton. And one of them was working as a receptionist on Brighton Pier in the office. And it was like being in, all of the owners of this establishment of Brighton Pier were said to be, known to be, sort of mafia-like people from Newcastle. So they were like Newcastle mafia. And they were all like in their 70s and like misogynists and just the worst kind, like a Trump supporter type, basically. That was one of the worst jobs. I think I lasted about 3 days. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yikes.
It was horrible.
I'm sorry about that.
And very very Me Too with it as well. It was disgusting. Oh, yeah, it makes me shudder thinking about it.
Oh, that's nasty. I'm sorry you had to go through that, but I'm glad you got out fast.
Yeah. Well, I was used to be, when I was looking for work, if it didn't please me very quickly, I left very quickly. I didn't stick around very long. I either got bored or, mostly bored quickly, actually, is what used to happen.
I feel you. That was like my life as well. But this is not about me, so we're not going to that. But yeah, I feel I identify with that trait. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, kind of, when you like spend a lot of years skipping around the idea of something, like, I don't know, it feels clearer to me now what was going on, but, like dabbling in other people's creative spaces and then like dipping your toes in. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. Not given the example I've just given of Brighton Pier, but, like I used to work as a poster girl, flyer girl, and I used to work in a print marketing place for live events and music events. And then I used to get to go to those events for free. And then I started writing reviews of the things I went to, and then I started writing, then I was doing journalism, and then I started hanging out with musicians, and then I became band manager, and you know what I mean, and putting on events and like running. I used to take like the people who were into the indie gay scene in Brighton. I used to run buses up to London to go out to King's Cross to like all of the big indie gay nights. So I was always, moving around other people's creativity without really doing it for myself, which is, I guess, what happened when I left Brighton and came back to London.
Yeah,
there's still a bit of a gap, but yeah.
I think that's one
Sorry,
of the...
that was a lot of
No, but that's one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you, because of course, I think most people will know you from your food. You have Zoe's Ghana Kitchen. You've done tons of supper clubs and pop-up residencies. So we could say you're sort of an events pro, but you're launching a new book now, and basically...
Oh, it's not a new book. Sorry, that sounds... I'm so sorry. It's the same cookbook, but it has a new jacket, so it's enlivened, and obviously it has a new introduction.
Yes, and quotes from by Nigella, very fancy,
and some endorsements from some wonderful humans. Yes. Including Nigella Lawson and Bryant Terry and Diana Henry and lots of people. Yolanda Kmalfa, Ruby Tando. People have been very nice to me.
That's really amazing. I'm sure you deserve all of that praise. Diana Henry is I have a friend who's an amazing cook, and Diana Henry is one of her biggest, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, she's like a grand dame of British cookery, isn't she? Yeah.
But
I didn't know. I didn't even know she knew who I was, and she reached out to me. She's so lovely.
No way! Oh my God, I love when that happens. Not that it happens that much to me, but I feel like that's a really nice, full circle moment of the universe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the full circle bit on that one, but I mean, certainly there's been a lot of collaboration and, networking.
Yeah.
But not like networking in like what's the word? Let me tell you about a part of my spiritual and like personal professional growth over the last sort of 18 months.
Yes.
Prior to the last 18 months, I know I used to have a really hard time asking for help and receiving help well, and just trusting people. I had some issues. Let's just put it like that. And what I've been learning to do is be connected to people and be vulnerable in that connection, which I think has come across as only for the better for me, because it's just increased authenticity. I can be more of myself if I'm a bit more open. And so it's meant that I've got better at asking generally, not just asking for help. So just connecting with people that I like, the cut of their jib. So if I'm following somebody on Instagram and they don't know me from God knows who, I'll be like, hey, love your profile. I want to get a coffee over Zoom, if there's synergy in what they think or believe or what they're doing, or I just am a fan. I've just got really good over the last year of just be at reaching out more to people. And that's been, and what's been great about that is, on the flip side, other people have been great at reaching out to me, and that's how that Diana Henry connection came about.
That's incredible. So what was the did you not feel comfortable before doing that? What were the big changes that you've made in sort of your networking strategy, I guess?
I didn't have a networking strategy ever. And I mean, I never have. I've never entertained the concept of networking because I've always thought of it as it's about, I'll tell you what it was. I was in a scarcity mentality for a very long time. And when you're in that kind of mindset, it just makes you fearful of things. And also I had a lot of sort of negative EQ with money. I don't know if that makes sense, but my relationship with money was quite negative. When you're things that get fed to you information wise as a child and what you experience as a kid, it kind of just plays into your whole mindset and your subconscious. And I think that for me, networking was something that was associated with highfalutin high-powered CEOs and like really stinking rich people. And I had that judgment of that kind of space ingrained in me, And so my mindset has changed considerably because I've been, just doing some work and doing some work on myself and, just being more on top of my wellness and my kind of having a spiritual practice and things like that. And just being more in the moment and in the day and being more present and mindful. And it's just the rewards have been that I've been more connected to people and people have been more connected to me. And that's made me happy and good. And I've just realized that actually that is what I do best. Is I've always connected people together, other people. I've always been that person who's been able to introduce somebody to somebody else and know that that's a match for whatever it is, whether it's a business relationship or a friendship or whatever the relationship. I've always been good at matching people and connecting people. And then I realized actually what I'm good at is just connecting with people, and I'm embracing that. So that's why I'm doing 1,100 podcasts and all of the live IGs I did all, throughout last year. And just talking to people and I don't know, like trying to just get to know like what's going on for people and how can we fix it if it needs fixing, and how can we celebrate it if it needs celebrating, and just to be in conversation, to be in communion, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. That's very well put. I think it's interesting that you say you had this scarcity mindset and that it started changing like a year ago, while like basically then the pandemic hit all of us, but especially I guess the hospitality events and like the catering business, and scarcity is most of the news that we get. Like how did you adapt to the pandemic in terms of you yourself, but also your businesses?
Yeah. How did I do? Well, in order for Ghana Kitchen's main income or main business was catering and street food, and that involved all of the festival, weddings, large events, basically, where lots of people congregate. So that kind of put the business. I was on the verge of, having to go insolvent, basically having to be bankrupt because I wasn't eligible for any government assistance just because of, I'm a micro business and I'm a, self-employed director of a small, it's all of the gaps, basically I'm in them. So the immediate solution was to ask for help. And that was, I made a video. Basically, I launched a crowdfunder to open a community kitchen for 3 months because I thought there was a lot of different things going on. But my dad has schizophrenia and he's a high risk individual. And, it became apparent very quickly when the lockdown thing happened that his care was at risk. And it led me to think that there's probably a lot of people in my community whose care is at risk as well. And the only way that I could be of service would be to feed them. So given that my business was on its arse, I thought that a crowdfunder might solve both those problems at once, which it did. And so I made a video and, it went out on the old internet and people were very kind and supported the campaign. And so I was able to run a kitchen for 3 months, feeding various vulnerable groups, whether they be old or at-risk migrants and members of the LGBTQ community, and then also NHS staff in various hospitals around me, in the boroughs around me. So that kept the business going. Well, not the business going, it kept the business alive, let's say, for 3 months. And then I converted it into a spice shop, which is where we're at the moment. Ghana Kitchen's currently operating as an e-commerce platform selling single origin spices from West Africa through transparent supply chain. And, that is part of this bigger idea that I've taken on in the last year of decolonising the food industry. But this isn't, I just went on a rampage, just went on a different tangent. That's not the question you asked. You asked, how did I do that? And the reason I was able I guess the reason I had the mindset to be able to turn that shitstorm around was because I'd already begun this work of, looking. I basically ended up in hospital at the end of September last year, like really seriously ill in critical condition, and it's one of those moments of pain where you have to reevaluate your life and your goals and what you're doing and all that stuff. So I had already began this process of looking inward, and I took a sabbatical and went to New York to see my wife, and we just played rather than being in the business or anything like that. We played creatively, and we created menus for Sankofa, a new private dining concept, and we tested that concept, and it was really fun. Anyway, the point is, I decided to take a break and then come back to it with a different kind of energy and mindset, and that was just through doing a lot of listening to lots of podcasts, finding therapy, researching lots of different types of practice and working out what kind of practice is good for me in the morning, in which I have a really solid routine of meditation, exercise, journaling, gratitudes, affirmations, and all of that stuff, as well as also getting sober during that period, all kind of just made me very strong and gave me a lot of energy for these new ideas I had. And I had the space to make those ideas happen because I wasn't running a catering business,
Wow, that's a very intense journey for you, considering everything that the world is going through at the same time. I'm glad you're okay now. And it's interesting. I know that you mentioned about your routine in another interview recently about your meditation. I was going to ask you about that. But before, because I feel like we started everything like backwards, but okay. Just to give...
Sorry.
No, it's fine. I told you this goes on tangents. It's absolutely... That's the point. It's like an organic conversation so that more people can have insight into you, basically, in whatever form that may be. But I wanted you, if you could just give us a brief intro for anyone who does not know that much about you. I know, obviously, you had a diverse career before, I guess, rediscovering... or discovering Ghana through food somehow and bringing it to the UK. So do you remember when you first had the idea for what would be Zoe's Ghana Kitchen? And could you just give us a brief sort of intro to how you got it all started?
Oh God, it's really hard for me to do this in a short way. Okay.
It can be long. It's okay. Go for it.
I'll do it as condensed as I can. So 2010, I came back from America broke. It was the weekend of Hackney Wicked Arts Festival. My apartment was being used as an open studio because it was an open studios festival. Thousands of people came into Hackney Wick in a pre-gentrified Hackney Wick, meaning there was nowhere for them to eat or drink really. So I thought, it was an opportunistic moment for me to make money. So I thought I would sell a big pot of peanut butter stew, which I did. I borrowed the equipment to do so, and I made a pot. A friend made a sign saying Zoe's famous peanut butter stew. Famous, obviously, only to them and me, but, marketing. And then it was a great success, essentially, and people wanted me to do it again. And I said, no, thank you. It's been very nice, but no. But that occasion brought up some questions around why people didn't even know where Ghana was on a map, for Christ's sake. And people had never heard of the food, never heard of the dishes. And I thought that was interesting, but I just parked it there. And then a year later, that same weekend, because we had a lot of fun, we thought, let's do it again. But we did it in a much bigger way. And I turned my apartment into an actual restaurant for all intents and purposes. And people were trying to book, again, like next month. And they're like, no, sorry, this is my living room. That's my office. We've just made all of this for this weekend. But I collected email addresses and, I decided to do it again, essentially. And I kept deciding to do it again because it was fun and it was funding me through my MA at Goldsmiths, which meant I didn't have to work for anybody else apart from myself, which I absolutely loved and at my own convenience and doing something that was wonderful and lovely. So, it came organically in many ways. And I was very hesitant to do anything to do with food. I hadn't had any culinary training. It was never in my vision board that was something I was going to do, even though I had always loved cooking and loved feeding people. It just wasn't on my radar as something to pursue as a business. And eventually the supper clubs kept going, and halfway through, I finished my MA at Goldsmiths, and, the supper clubs were still happening. I decided I wanted to move to Berlin to focus on being a writer, but I used Ghana Kitchen to, as a job to feed myself while I was in Berlin. Anyway, I got a big following in Berlin, and then suddenly, I was going back and forth between Berlin and London, and I just thought, this is ridiculous. This is obviously, the universe is telling me that this is a business, stop fighting it. And it was at that point, so I left Berlin and came back to London and had to think, what is it about this that people love so much? And that's when it was like that business plan on the back of a fag packet thing of, okay, what's the mission? Bring African food to the masses because they don't know about it. And how am I going to do it in as many ways as possible, like catering, supper club, street food, and I did all the things, and that's how it came to be.
Friends, this is a quick break to tell you about our amazing sponsors Day, and women-led company revolutionizing your periods with sustainable tampons you can be proud of. They're clinically validated, cramp-soothing CBD tampons delivered straight to your door whenever it fits your cycle. To get £5 off your first box of tampons or probiotics, just head over to yourday.com and use the code NETWORKING5. That's very concise. Thank you, Zoe. But also, it's interesting how it all started as sort of a support system for your MA. And I guess you did an MA in writing, right? At Goldsmiths.
Yeah, creative and life writing. Yeah, it's a wonderful course.
Which I guess came in handy because you wrote this book and you are writing your memoir still.
Yes, I had to park it a bit because I got busy launching new businesses. But I'm going back to that this year. I would like to finish that finally. There is some interest in it actually.
Yes.
So it would be I want to get back to writing, but I want to be all aspects of who I am now. Actually, like I'm not just a chef, and I don't want to be just a chef anymore. I just want to be doing things that bring me and other people joy. So some of that is cooking, but some of that's lots of other things as well.
Yeah. So beyond the whole time management thing, which I'm sure was a struggle, what were the main challenges in getting Zoe's Ghana Kitchen up and running in your perspective, now in hindsight?
I wouldn't start a business the way I started that again. I made it really hard for myself, I have to say. The main struggles were that they only came as I tried to expand, actually. When I was just doing supper clubs and it was fine. I think when the catering jobs got bigger and bigger, basically I'm that kind of entrepreneur type who says yes and then works out how to do it. But I would say yes to a lot at the same time and then be very stretched. And so what would happen is I wouldn't have time to fully dedicate to training a team. So the kitchen team, who often also weren't qualified chefs, they were home cooks or people that just like food. I never was able to, it was very difficult then for me to ever be removed from any event or any, thing because I hadn't made the time to put in place a proper sort of training structure. And I guess an operations manual, which was something that I never did ever really fully do, to be honest. The paperwork side of business has never been my strong point, but I'm more of creative lead. But I think it was having team, not just for time support, but also just to grow with and share the vision with and stuff like that. I wasn't very good then, I think, at communicating a bigger vision. I think I kept it more inside of me then, because I don't know, I think I felt I was in that hustle mode constantly. And when you're constantly in hustle, you're not ever pausing to reflect on where you are necessarily, or how far you've come, or what direction you're going in, and if it's in the right direction even. So yeah, I think it's interesting that you mentioned time, because time is the biggest, like either the misuse of, or the overwork, or the under allotment of. I think it was actually ultimately the management of time that was the biggest struggle.
And did you find it easy to then find a team to support you and collaborators? I know that you've been focused on making sure that at least 50% of your workforce comes from marginalized communities, vulnerable people. You identify yourself as coming from a working class immigrant background. So how was that process for you in terms of hiring people, finding teams and collaborators? And I guess a really important question, because you are an entrepreneur, is how was it for you to delegate?
There's a lot of questions.
Sorry.
Okay. What was the...
You can start from the...
How was it trying to recruit people?
Yes.
Honestly, it was quite difficult. I mean, in one way it wasn't, because lots of people wanted to be part of something that they thought was cool and fun, which it was. But also, I needed like a specific skill set, and what I wanted. I found it really, really hard to recruit, for example, young Black or people of colour into the kitchen, because I don't think that they thought of that cuisine as particularly, like, if they were interested in cooking, they wanted to be in restaurants, and they wanted to be in fine dining, and they wanted to be doing that kind of thing. So it was quite hard to find people who were interested in cooking and knew about the food. That was a challenge. And that was to do around, perception of what was possible for that cuisine. Again, probably my bad, because I didn't do a good translation of what it could be. Maybe I didn't give them a good enough inspiration. But yeah. And what was the second part of that? Sorry?
Just asking about how it was for you to delegate, or how it...
Oh, to delegate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still am not great at it, actually. I've got definitely better. Actually, very recently, I've got really good at it, because it's become an emergency now. But historically, I've been quite bad. Actually, and I think what I've been bad at is sometimes giving a person, like delegating something, and probably, again, due to my poor communication skills, not either giving them all they needed to get that done the way I wanted it, or not communicating exactly how I wanted it to be. Do you know what I mean? And then being frustrated at the outcome. I remember feeling frustrated a lot. But, I've improved my communication skills now and my delegation skills. So, I did a lot of rough learning, basically. I dragged myself through the ringer on all levels. If it was HR, accounting, I was, when you're doing street food, you're a plumber, you're an electrician, you're front of house, you're back of house, you're the driver, you're everything. And it's the same when you're in a small business, right? You're the FD, the CTO, the COO, you're all of the hats. And what's important is to learn how and when to give over a hat, and to who. And I think that part was the bit I got a bit lost in. But I don't regret any of it. Like, everything, I learned a hell of a lot along the journey, and it's been good.
Yeah, I mean, the wisdom of the hindsight is always easier, right? Like, when you look and you're like, oh, I should have done it this way. But when you're in it, it can be quite difficult. And also, I guess you started Zoe's Ghana Kitchen a long time ago, and the UK food scene changed a lot. And you mentioned that a lot of people weren't that familiar, for instance, with Ghana as a country, but as a cuisine. So how do you think the sort of image of the African cuisine has changed in the UK since you started?
I think considerably. I think that, there's a lot more as well. There's two things that have happened in parallel here, and that is the increased visibility of Black cooking or food talent in general across print media, and broadcast. And then also, there was the Groundnut cookbook, there was my cookbook, there was Lope Riley's cookbook, Yemisi's Long Throat memoirs. And there continues to be now, I mean, there was a bit of a stall, I think, in any more African books coming out. They probably thought, we've done Africa for a while. But, there continues to be now more cookbooks coming out from the continent, and more talent being profiled and represented. Mostly that changes in the last year, frankly, following Black Lives Matter. But gradually, on a drip feed, that has happened over the last 10 years. And also the number of people just cooking from their home countries on the continent of Africa has increased. Chukus who had a really good street food concept, have now gone on to open a great restaurant. Shizuru, Akoko, Stork in Mayfair, all of the supper clubs, all of the, Lemlems, Vingu. There's 100 times, maybe 500, I don't know, more, 200 times more sort of street food, supper clubs, restaurants and all that than when I started 10 years ago, which is an incredible amount of increase in supply, which must mean, as I predicted, that there's a huge demand once people know what it is. So that can only continue and grow, I hope. And, and it's definitely the case in the States. I've seen that there's more engagement with African cuisine there as people in the, African Americans engage with that part of their ancestry, and food, as always, is the great, gateway to culture. So I think that we're still only at the tip of this revolution, really, and it will continue to grow. And I'm excited to be part of it.
Yeah, you say on that part of your mission really is, or central to your mission is, to decolonize the food industry and their diets. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like how, yeah.
Well, decolonizing in general is a theme, really, for my life. But obviously my specific lens at the moment is food, but soon it will also be wellness. But, what that means for me is, I think, in a world where we understand that white supremacy is the greatest power and the biggest threat to humanity, and we need to understand where that comes from, and it comes from colonialism. And there needs to be an examination of the impact of colonialism on how we think and how we, treat ourselves, treat our bodies, treat our minds, how we measure ourselves against our fellow man, and whether we look after our fellow man or we don't. There just has to be this reevaluation of what is higher culture, what is higher thinking, who tells who what is good or bad and why, and for whose benefit, and where that all stems from, because every aspect of society, frankly, is built on colonialism, all of our institutions, and most of that has come at the cost of continents like Africa. So, and, India and the so-called developing countries, as we used to be lumped together after the raping and pillaging of our resources. So, decolonizing is just a thread that runs through my being, I suppose. I know that sounds really fucking lofty and crap, but it's just kind of a core of what I understand to be behind anti-racism. And I think that, if you think about all of the work that needs to be done just in the concept of anti-racism, for me, I think the work starts with decolonizing before you can even touch anti-racism, because it's the core of the problem is that deep, it's that systemic. It's like it's the trauma of 500 years of being trod upon, and what that does for your mindset, and what that does for how you exist in the world, and what your goals are and your purpose, and so many different parts of how you perform life and business and relationships. It all feeds into that. So I think it's just a massive issue. Obviously, again, not it's such a big topic that I can't obviously think of tackling all of that. So I have to focus on where my time is best spent in having that kind of conversation, and it's best spent in the food industry, obviously, because that's where I have some profile. And so it's about trying to always lead these conversations, and and make them a fabric of everything I'm doing. Not necessarily like shoving it down people's, it's not about that so much. It's just trying to sort of guide people to think a little bit broader, because it is a lot. It's a lot to take on as a concept. But but as a concept, it's huge. But in practice, the changes can be quite small. You know what I mean? It's like, if you think about who you're buying from and what it is that you're buying from them, and like, who made that, and do you think that they got paid fairly compared to the price that you're paying on the packet? And do you think it's just getting people to have these mindfulness moments around ingredients and around seasonality, perhaps, and around sustainability and around just purchasing decisions. That will, it's about a tipping point, isn't it? And the more people we can educate in small bite-sized ways, then the more collective consciousness raises, I think, overall.
Yes, and I think food is always like food can create such a great space even to like hold conversations. I mean, you said you like to talk and connect people, so that for me makes sense, because it is about, at least like in, compartir, like comes from like breaking bread, and so like it's all about sharing a table, sharing something made, together to nourish. Exactly. So there's a lot that can happen in that space, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
And so I know we are running a bit out of time, but I want to ask you 2 more questions. I promise they won't be as long as difficult as the last ones. If that's...
It wasn't difficult, I just waffle on and on. I told you I like talking.
It's fine, I love talking. I could talk to you a lot. You have a great voice. You should do something like radio based.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I think so.
Thanks.
It's very soothing. What I wanted to know, what was the process for you of like writing a recipe book? Because I don't know if that's what you imagined yourself doing when you first went to Berlin. Like, how did the whole thing go for you? Was it something that you were ready to do? Was it like a massive hurdle? Like, was it a really enjoyable process? Because we have a lot of people that want to either write or be in the publishing industry in our community. And I think that we often don't think about that those are always thought as like fiction, and we don't talk a lot about everything else that exists. And I think cookbooks are just such a specific type of project to tackle,
Yeah, I mean, was I ready? I mean, I had got to the point of mentally thinking that I could, I felt in a place of professional growth where I could do a cookbook. I felt ready in that respect. But obviously I had no idea of what was really involved in writing. I don't think I really understood the task at hand completely, which sounds stupid, but I don't know. But, the process was, part of the process was going back to Ghana, which was incredible. And, a huge moment of, again, spirit and professional growth. So that was amazing. Writing like all the creative things around the book was amazing. Like, being able to do the introduction and all the head notes and write the stories that are in there and all of that. The recipes themselves were incredibly, it was challenging because I was like a home cook turned chef, maybe, if you will. And, I was used to cooking by instinct and sight and, pinch of this, bit of that, da, da, da. So, while there was a canon of recipes that existed, for obviously, because I had a catering business, they weren't all necessarily recipes that would go in the book, but also they were like catering quantity recipes, So it was just like, oh my God, how do I make this a meal for 2, So it had a lot of challenges, and also time again, because I had my restaurant at the time in Brixton, and I was, working all the shifts every day. So, it was like long 16-hour days, driving an hour from Brixton to Hackney Wick, and then, having dinner or a snack or whatever I could put in my gob, and then like writing until 2 or 3 in the morning, and then, and it was just like that for 3 months. So that part of it wasn't fun necessarily, but there were moments in that were fun, because sometimes when you're writing, it's just like when you're in the flow of it, it's kind of joyful. You get this I don't know how to describe that. I'm sure everybody knows what their flow state's like, but so it was difficult, but also again I learned a lot doing it, and the shoot was quite fun. The shoot was lots of fun, actually. But I don't know if I was completely present for it, because there was always like other things happening. I think during that whole process, I don't know that I was entirely present, which is why it's especially nice that the book is kind of, but it is being re-released. So I get to have that kind of, that moment again, if you know what I mean. Like, and I'm here for it now, whereas I wasn't really there for it because so much else was going on around me while it was happening. So in terms of like business, I mean, like just work and stuff. So yeah, I hope that answers your question and makes sense. Yeah. But I'm how I would approach a cookbook now and how I'm approaching the book I'm writing now is completely different. It's way much more structured. The treatment is more detailed, and there's much more sort of intention behind it. And I think, Zoe's Ghana Kitchen Cookbook is a representation of my energy and my headspace at the time, which was, la, 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 like, I love this. I love everything about this. I want you to experience it. Da, da, da. And I still have that energy, but it's a bit more balanced now, with other aspects of my experience and of myself. So this book has a kind of a different tone, and a different modality to it. But, Zoe's Ghana Kitchen is all, you can kind of tell as well, because it's really, I think Ruby Tando described it quite well in that article about it being kind of, it's like, it's very, my energy is very excited. I think that's what she was trying to say. Because I'm just like, I'm so excited because I'm fresh back from this experience in Accra, and I'm telling you about my family, and I'm telling you these anecdotes about me going to market. So, it's all like that energy. And so all of that energy, I'm glad and happy and grateful to say I still retain, but it's just a bit more harnessed and a bit more, sometimes, but in other times, it's like, check out my Instagram and post 100 things in one day because I'm in a good mood. I don't know. You know what I mean? But, the book is like this, it's a love letter to Ghana. And it's like, it's about exactly where I was then. It's really of its time. But the recipes are recipes I still cook today, but I would probably write the book differently. Actually, no, I wouldn't. I love the way that book is laid out. I mean, I love the playlists. I love the, it's such a personal, it's almost like a bit of my diary, a bit of me kind of thing. So there's nothing I would change about it. And I love the cover and its texture, and it's completely evocative of what Ghana Kitchen was doing at the time. And it was, bringing traditional recipes to people's attention, but adding this kind of more contemporary element of trying to show people what else could be possible with this cuisine. It's like, if we think outside the box a little bit, look how delicious it is, and that was just so, because I wanted to encourage people to not be intimidated by it, but also to fall in love with the ingredients as much as the dishes, because it was the ingredients that they could bring into their everyday, and they still can.
Yeah. I
and
love that.
ease it with much more ease these days because they are just more available now, thanks to the growth in interest in African food. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It's so much easier to find ingredients. A lot of Brazilian cuisine from the Northeast especially uses a lot of obviously African ingredients because our cuisine came from the African slaves, right? They came from mainly West Africa. And it's funny because sometimes you go to a dish and you either go to like a Latin American shop or like an African shop, but it is so much easier to find everything these days, which is super nice.
Yeah.
Even for us as Latins.
I know, we share so many ingredients. And I love that, And that's the other thing. It's like, we're in completely different continents and we have the same ingredients and, very, 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 very close names for things. Don't you have like a plantain fritter? What do you call that? Ajara.
Acarajé.
Acarajé,
Yes.
yeah. And we have like a cara.
Yeah.
And we have, we have lots of things we do very similarly. And even the names sound quite similar.
Yes.
But yeah, like ingredients like obviously maize and, yams, plantains, obviously, cassava.
Yes.
Quite a lot of pulses, I think, as well we have in common, right?
Yeah.
Do you have bambara?
No, I don't know. What is that?
Bambara is it's really nutrient, protein heavy. It's like a chickpea, and it's really creamy and nutty and delicious.
I'm gonna check.
But it's actually ground nuts.
Nice.
Technically, because it goes into the ground. But it looks like a chickpea, and you can cook it like a chickpea essentially. But it's just got a bit more depth of flavour to it,
Oh my god.
It's got
getting so hungry now. I'm just imagining all the food. Zoe, before you go, can you give us either the best career advice you've ever received or what advice you've give anyone starting their own businesses now?
The best advice I've ever received is don't rush. And I say that because when I did my first degrees in law, and when I finished my law degree, I had a tutor called Edward who was very inspirational to me. And he had basically he did his first degree in law as well, and he spent 10 years bumming around Bali and the tropics and came back and, did his conversion and then became a very high-powered and very well-respected barrister. And I remember him talking to me about that, because I knew that I didn't want to go into law practice really, definitely not straight after uni, but just hearing him talking about the fact that there was no need to rush, because once I had the degree, I'd always have the degree, or whatever the thing is that you have, like whatever qualification it is. But anyway, and also just because, in our 20s, there's still so much processing and digesting, and there's still so much to explore and be curious about. So my advice would be to be, don't rush, but and be curious. That's what my advice would be.
I love that advice. It's very good. I wish I had heard that as well in my 20s. Although I rushed for everything, I'm like severely anxious about things, but. I think that's really
we
nice.
live in a different kind of world now, and I think that the old paradigms around, work, success, career, all of those things, I think, the paradigms around them are shifting a little bit, and I think it's more important for people to be curious to find out what they're good at, because when you are curious enough to keep trying things that you think you like doing, your skill or your gift will emerge, and in that emerging, work no longer becomes work, it becomes play, because you'll end up getting paid for what you love to do. So that's why, and I say don't rush, because it's really hard for people to think like that when they're in school or university. And that's why I say be curious, so as to keep your mind open to what that could be, but just to think about not rushing into things and just like take a minute.
I love that, Zoe. And finally, before you go, besides your incredible book full of recipes and inspiration, what are 3 things you'd like to recommend people now? So anything that will bring them joy or that it's bringing you joy. So it can be one recipe, book, a movie, and song, anything you like.
Okay, I'm going to tell you about this guy on Instagram. He does a breath workshop with, he does traditional African drumming, and he gives me life every day. He's lovely, lovely face. I'll cheer up anyone's day. Hang on, I've got to find him. Or is she? He's in my stories. Apologies to those listening. Kiire Wellness. He is Kiire Wellness on Instagram. Check out his breathing workshops with some rhythm. They're so cool. I love him. Platforms I like right now, Tastemakers Africa. I love Tastemakers Africa because it's like life, culture, food, travel from all across Africa. They've got a really cool, they're always putting on cool talks and events online and stuff. And books, I just heard a snippet of Cast. The author's name escapes me. I think it's Kimberly something, but I just heard a snippet of that book being read on a podcast, and I want to read that book.
Wait,
next.
It's not the one from Isabel Wilkerson.
That's it, yeah.
Yes.
Isabel Wilkerson. That's just gone to the top of my reading list.
That's on my reading list as well. Maybe we can do a little book club.
Yeah, okay. I'm down.
Amazing.
I spent the last year on I got addicted to audiobooks, babe. I've listened to like so many books this last year. But I want that in a physical copy, I've decided as well. I like to have my literary stuff in there so I can hold it in my hand. But like all the other things I don't mind as an audio format. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But that's just how it is.
It's all right. I like old school books in my head as well. So that's a good tip so that everyone can get yours as well. Maybe they can do a culinary book club as well.
Yeah.
Zoe, thank you so much again for giving your time to us. I really appreciate you and your tips and sharing your journey so much with us. And I wish you nothing but the biggest success from here on. And I'm sure we'll be in touch soon again.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Gosh, I can't speak. Sorry. Thank you very much for having me. Lovely pleasure. And yes, I'm sure we'll be connected off of this podcast, but in real life, and see you soon.
I would love it. Thank you so much, Zoe. Have a wonderful end of the day for you. Thank you for listening to the Island Networking Podcast. If you've enjoyed that conversation, why not send it to a friend? Rate, review, or subscribe to our podcast because really that helps us a lot. We also have a membership scheme, a mentoring program, online events, digital resources, and much, much more. To get involved with us and figure out everything that we do, just head over to ilightnetworking.uk or find us on Instagram at ilightnetworking. We have more incredible guests coming up next week, so don't forget to tune in every Friday for the podcast. See you next time.